Hello, can you give us some concrete examples or some facts about women's participation in trade union activity and at various levels?
Sir, women's participation in union activity is different, and unions representation in the trade union at the decision making level.
Yes.
Women's participation is increasing as in the number of women members of the unions are increasing. So participation of women in trade union has been increasing in past few decades. But at the same time, the representation of women or the participation of women in decision making bodies, in decision making structures of the union has not grown proportionately. One concrete example I can give is that the Indian Labour Conference, which takes place every year, and the Prime Minister inaugurates the conference mostly, and all the national centers of the trade unions are present. In that, the representation of women is hardly 5%. So in all the delegates and the observers together, the percentage of women is just around 5% every year. This is shocking because in our workplace we have 29% women, and maybe in the organized sector the percentage may be low, because the more women are working in agricultural field and construction workers. In informal economy there are more women working, but even in the formal economy, like in the banks or the other services sectors like hospitality industry or the health industry, there are women working, and all of them have their unions. So why don't we see more women representing in the ILC or in other decision making bodies? And for this, the national centers as well as the trade unions and the women, of course, we do need the women also to respond to any of the efforts done by the trade unions. But how it is happening at the moment is that the trade union leaders say, oh, the women are not interested, and the women say, oh, the trade unions are not really doing anything for us, they are not really encouraging us to come, they are not holding meetings at the time which is convenient for us. So it is, I guess there is a sort of a communication gap, and it should be bridged as fast as possible, because today the conditions are really leading to very precarious position for the worker, and no organization of the workers, no trade union can afford a large chunk of their membership to be passive, and women are a large chunk of the membership, and no union can afford to have a passive membership. So it is imperative that all the unions or all the trade unions or the national centers do go in for planned activities to involve more and more women in the mainstream activities, and to equip them, to prepare them to take up better positions in the union structures. This will definitely make the unions more effective.
One more question to you. You have been president of Apro.
Women Committee.
Pardon?
Apro Women Committee.
Apro Women Committee, and you have travelled extensively abroad representing unions. Do you see a difference between what is happening abroad and in India when it comes to representation of ladies in trade unions?
Along with the Apro exposure to overseas travel, I have also been part of gender studies under Global Labour University, and from the reports which I saw, whether it is the report from New Zealand or whether the report from Ghana, the conditions of women are almost similar. The glass ceiling which exists in trade unions for women exists everywhere. But at the same time, there are more women who are taking part in the mainstream activities in Africa. They are not only taking part in developed countries like Scandinavia, but they are taking part in Africa, In Malaysia, two of the uni affiliates have women general secretaries and women presidents, and these union, they have been there in that position for many years, and they have been working quite effectively. So the change is coming,
Yeah.
but the pace is very, very slow.
Base is slow. Right. We were discussing some time back that when you joined the banking industry, there were some jobs, kind of reserved for men, were not allotted to women. Okay. And can you talk a little more about it, or glass door policy, as we say?
Okay, sir. Sir, when I joined bank, that was more than 35 years ago. So at that time, that was actually this year, it will be 40 years ago. So at that time, there were certain jobs in the branch level which were reserved for the men. Certain desks which will be handled by the men only.
Like?
And there will be transfer scrolls, or the making of the performance report, or the desk which deals with cash credit, or the desk which deals with foreign exchange. These desks were reserved for the men.
Okay.
And
Reserved means in practice.
in practice,
Okay.
not reserved in law, but
Yeah.
they were reserved in practice, because they were, the people said that sitting on these desks involves longer working hours, and you just cannot take leave at imperative times. And for women, she may go on leave anytime because of her children's health or any other responsibilities. So we cannot entrust a woman with those desks.
Yeah.
But subsequently what happened is that there was more and more intake of women in the banks,
Yeah.
and all these partitions simply collapsed. All these walls simply collapsed
Did
because
they collapse also because of technology?
I think they collapsed before the advent of technology, simply because more women started working, and there were more women in the branches, and they had to be allotted work, and they showed the capabilities of handling these desks.
Yeah. Great.
And
Thank you so
but
much.
one I would like to add is that again 40 years ago when I joined the bank, mine was one of the first batches where a lot of girls were taken into the banking industry in our bank, and there used to be open discussion by the seniors in front of us that all these women, they are definitely going to affect the future of the bank, because these women will not take up higher responsibilities once they get married, and then what will happen? The banks will not find the requisite officers, and the bank will go down in performance.
Yeah.
But today, many of the public sector banks and the private sector banks are headed by women,
Yeah.
and the women are working in all the management capacities in all private and public sector.
Yeah.
And the banks have improved their performances over the decade, whether it is business per employee or profit per employee. On all parameters, the banks have improved consistently. It doesn't seem that as if because a woman is leading a bank, the performance has gone down. So this is how the perception changes, and your
Right,
experience,
right.
your perception and your experience may be totally different.
Right. Thank you so much.